We have breaking news. We will be posting the rest of Brett's interview with Secretary Azar on our Fox News special report website. But we have breaking news. President Trump has just tweeted, "I am pleased to announce that effective 4/9/18, April 9th, Ambassador John Bolton will be my new national security advisor. I am very thankful for the service of General H.R. McMaster, who has done an outstanding job and will always remain my friend. There will be an official contact handover on 4/9, April 9th. So the president announcing that H.R. McMaster, General McMaster, is out as his national security advisor, and former Ambassador John Bolton, a Fox News contributor, is in as the national security advisor. I think it's fair to say, let me first bring in the panel, Byron York from the Washington Examiner, Susan Page of USA Today, and Jonathan Swan of Axios. I think it's fair to say that this, while the timing may be a bit of a surprise, the fact that McMaster was going to be out sooner, probably rather than later, is maybe a surprise, the timing of it. Jonathan, you've been covering this, and the question as to whether or not McMaster is out and when he was going to be out and who the replacement was going to be. Your thoughts?
Well, I'll tell you, this has shocked people inside the building. Again, it's the timing of it. There was an assumption that at some point he was going to remove H.R. McMaster. They never formed a personal chemistry. He never worked out how to brief the president. And this appointment of John Bolton, this is not about ideology. This is not about ideology. John Bolton is as interventionist and hawkish as they come, and this is about personal chemistry with the President of the United States. He thinks he's strong, he sees him on television, he likes him, and again, H.R. McMaster never really gelled with this president. It didn't become as toxic as it did with Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State, but he was seen as a dead man walking for months inside the White House.
All right, I want to talk a little bit more about this, but General McMaster has just issued a statement in response to the statement from President Trump. McMaster says, after 34 years of service to our nation, I am requesting retirement from the U.S. Army effective this summer, after which I will leave public service. Throughout my career, it has been my greatest privilege to serve alongside extraordinary service members and dedicated civilians. I am thankful to President Donald J. Trump for the opportunity to serve him and our nation as a national security advisor. I am grateful for the friendship and opportunity of the members of the National Security Council who work together to provide the president with the best options to protect and advance our national interests. I'm especially proud to have served alongside the men and women of the National Security Council staff who established a strong foundation for protecting the American people, promoting American prosperity, achieving peace through strength, and advancing American influence. I know that these patriots will continue to serve our president and our nation with distinction. Before I bring in Susan and Byron, Jonathan, the reason I think we're a little bit surprised is there was a story on the front page, I believe it was the Washington Post last week, that said McMaster was out. And over on Friday, McMaster and Kelly said, no, he's not out, that he's there. You know, it's that dreaded vote of confidence. So why give him the vote of confidence and then less than a week later pull the rug out?
Because the honest truth is they didn't know the timing. They didn't know the timing. And I'll tell you, because I was one of those reporters on Thursday that reached out to the White House. And the reason the Washington Post could run that story was the White House stopped pushing back. On Thursday last week, the White House stopped leaning into aggressively opposing reporters who were saying, you know, I'm hearing McMaster is out. They suddenly said, basically, behind the scenes, we're not really going to wave you off that in a very aggressive way. The next morning, you can't completely say the guy's gone while he's still in the job. So they had to walk this very awkward tightrope, knowing full well that the President of the United States wanted a new national security advisor, not knowing who that person would be or when he was going to make the decision. And I'll just tell you, this afternoon, I was getting calls from the White House. The press team was chaotic, running around. It seems to me like they were caught a little bit off guard by what happened today.
Susan, I mean, there are two aspects of this that are interesting. One, obviously, is McMaster, his service, why he didn't gel with the president, and then the appointment of John Bolton and what that says about the president's foreign policy going forward. And we've got to remember, we're now less than 2 months away, if it goes as planned, from a summit with Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, and the president is going to have a completely new well, except for the Defense Secretary, National Security team, a new Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, a new National Security Advisor in John Bolton. And we also need to remember McMaster was brought in after the precipitous and sudden firing after 3 weeks of Michael Flynn as National Security Advisor. First, your thoughts on McMaster, what he did right, what he did wrong.
Well, as we've said, he wasn't a good fit, kind of in personality ways, with the president. Although Bolton wasn't either when they first met. Remember, Bolton was up for a job and went and met with the president and did not immediately click with him either. You know, the reason this is shocking but not surprising because we knew McMaster was having trouble. It's shocking because of the timing that you mentioned. This spring, we're supposed to have a meeting with the North Korean leader. We may not have a Secretary of State. We don't know that Mike Pompeo will be confirmed by the time the North Korean meeting takes place, if it takes place on time. Now, of course, the National Security Advisor can work at the president's discretion, doesn't require confirmation, so he can start in April, as they've said. But this is a time when we've got these huge foreign policy challenges. We know that the State Department is not staffed up in the way it traditionally has been staffed up with experts, and now the president will have this new team that will take, presumably, at least some time to find their footing.
Well, and as I'm thinking, as you're talking, we're all obviously reacting in real time here. The president surprised his foreign policy team when he had his phone call with Vladimir Putin this week, not only congratulating him on his victory, but perhaps more consequentially talking about having a meeting in the not-too-distant future, and they're not supposed to be in the same city for one of these huge multilateral meetings until next November. So conceivably, they could on the fly be having to deal with a Kim Jong-un summit and a Vladimir Putin summit.
Yeah, and meanwhile, we've started a trade war with China. So if you want to talk about a world...
we don't know that we have a trade war with them, but we've...
It's possible. It's a world in some turmoil, that's for sure.
You know, it is interesting, Byron, about John Bolton, who's a respected member of the Fox News team, as a contributor, because I do know the president was considering him when he first came in December, during the transition, December of 2016, and one of the concerns was the fact that he was very aggressive, that he was a neoconservative in the sense of wanting to confront other countries. Of course, the president ran on the idea of avoiding those kinds of international entanglements.
I think you can talk about one policy in particular, in the sense that McMaster, I think, was a guy who told the president he couldn't do stuff, particularly concerning the Iran nuclear deal. It has to be recertified every 3 months. So it's come up, 4 times so far, and the president wants to get out of it, and they said, no, you can't do that. Maybe you should kind of pull out a little bit, or issue an ultimatum, or get some other people to try to get them on board. There's other things you can do. Meanwhile, our commitment to it stands. Now, he sees John Bolton on television talking about the Iran nuclear deal. He sees Bolton on television taking a very hard line toward North Korea. So he calls him up. It's not like they haven't talked all year. They have been talking at various times. So I think he feels that he wants that kind of voice. Also, this is a position that doesn't have to be confirmed by the Senate. And George W. Bush, when he made Bolton the UN ambassador, had to do it through recess appointment because Rand Paul and a few other members of the U.S. Senate just said it would not happen. So it had to be, if you're going to appoint Bolton, had to be in a non-confirmed position.
All right, panel, stand by. We're going to continue this conversation in a moment.